Hey folks, I know I am just an old guy telling stories, but please leave a like and subscribe before we start. Let's enjoy in today's stories. Before I dive into today's stories, I want to say, disclaimer. The content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. The job offer came to me under the dim light of my laptop screen, casting long shadows around my cluttered living room. A user on a niche dark web forum I frequented had posted a desperate plea. There was a substantial reward for anyone willing to venture into an abandoned mental hospital to search for a missing person. The nature of the request, disturbing yet undeniably enticing, had caught my eye, not because I was courageous, but because I was desperately in need of the money. A few exchanges later, I found myself pulling into the gravel parking lot of the Willowbrook Asylum, armed with nothing more than a flashlight, a camera, and an annotated map provided by the person who'd hired me. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of deep purple and orange. Despite the beauty, the sprawling, decrepit structure before me swallowed any warmth the sunset offered. Willowbrook Asylum had been shut down in the late 90s amid scandal and whispers of mistreatment. The building, now choked by ivy and graffiti, had the typical eerie aura of places forgotten by time. I steeled myself, reminding my jittery nerves of the need for the reward at the end of this. I approached the main entrance, the rusted doors creaking ominously as I pushed them open. Inside, the air was cool and musty, filled with the scent of decay and damp. My flashlight beam danced over peeling paint and broken furniture, the remnants of its past life scattered around like the bones of a picked-over carcass. I had been warned that the person I was looking for wasn't simply missing, they were hiding. According to my client, his brother had come here on a dare, a thrill-seeking venture that turned sour. He had entered the asylum and never came out. He had evaded the search parties and ignored the pleas broadcasted over loudspeakers at the edge of the safety perimeter. My job was to find him, convince him to leave his hiding, and ensure his safety. As I ventured deeper into the belly of the asylum, the building seemed to groan under its own weight, the sound echoing off the walls like the whispers of those long gone. The map led me to the residential wings where patients once lived. Doors lined the hallway, some shut tight with rusted padlocks, others hanging open like broken jaws. My first instinct was to call out, to announce my presence, but I remembered the advice my client had given me. It's not just his brother that's hiding in there. Something else is too, something watchful. Instead of shouting, I opted for a more silent search, listening intently for any signs of movement other than my own. Room by room I searched. Most were empty, filled only with debris and the occasional scurrying of rats. Others contained belongings that seemed oddly preserved, relics of a time best forgotten. A child's doll with one eye, a stack of faded journals, photographs of smiling people whose fates were probably as grim as the surroundings. I was about to leave another seemingly empty room when something caught my eye. There, under the remains of a collapsed bookshelf, was a newer-looking sneaker. Its presence was stark against the dust and grime of the rest of the room. As I crouched down to inspect it, the air shifted around me, a sudden drop in temperature making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I wasn't alone. Turning slowly, I shined my flashlight toward the corner of the room where the shadows seemed deepest. For a moment, nothing. Then, in a stutter of movement too quick to follow, something retreated into the darkness beyond my light's reach. Despite the fear gripping at my chest, I pressed on, driven by the dual forces of necessity and an increasing curiosity about what truly resided in Willowbrook Asylum. Whatever it was, I knew one thing for certain. Finding the missing person was no longer just a job. It was a test of my own sanity and resolve. After the fleeting glimpse of something or someone darting away, I gathered my nerve and moved cautiously toward where the figure had vanished. My heart beat a steady rhythm of anticipation as I trained my flashlight ahead, its beam slicing through the thick darkness. The corridor outside the room stretched long and narrow, lined with doors that led to other forgotten rooms. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant drip of water echoing through the halls like a metronome in this eerie symphony of abandonment. I pressed forward, my footsteps muffled by the layer of dust and debris that carpeted the floor. The flashlight in my hand felt like the only thing tethering me to reality as shadows played tricks on my eyes, making the mundane sinister. It was in this heightened state of alertness that I noticed a peculiar pattern. Some of the doors were marked with small, subtle signs. Not graffiti. These were different. They were symbols, crudely drawn in chalk or charcoal, almost like a code. Recalling the map I'd been given, I realized these marks weren't random. They indicated safe zones established by the missing person's brother during his initial days in the asylum, rooms where he felt secure enough to hide or rest. Curiosity propelled me to one of the marked doors. Gently pushing it open, I entered what appeared to have once been a small office. Inside, amidst the disarray, were signs of recent habitation. A makeshift bed, a pile of empty food wrappers, and a lantern that looked barely used. I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. Relief that I was potentially on the right track, and apprehension about why he had chosen to remain hidden here in the bowels of a place as foreboding as Willowbrook. The room also contained a backpack, resting against the wall. I approached and inspected its contents, hoping for clues. Inside, I found a journal, a beacon of insight into the mindset of the one I was searching for. Flipping through its pages under the flashlight's glow, I read entries that spoke of initial bravery that spiraled into paranoia. The entries mentioned a presence that seemed to stalk the corridors, an entity that was part of the asylum itself. But the journal ended abruptly, a final entry that trailed off into a scrawled mess. It was as if fear had taken hold, gripping the writer's mind and forcing the pen from his hand. I pocketed the journal, thinking it might help me understand what had truly happened here. As I exited the room, I made a mental note of the other marked doors. Each one could be another piece of the puzzle, another step closer to finding him. I needed to explore each one, but I also needed to be wary. The entity mentioned in the journal was an ever-looming threat, its nature and intentions unclear. Navigating through the dimly lit halls, I continued my search, the weight of the asylum's oppressive atmosphere bearing down on me. Each shadow seemed to whisper secrets of the past, each creak and moan a warning to turn back. Yet with each step, I delved deeper into the mystery, driven by a resolve to not only find the missing man, but to uncover the truth of Willowbrook Asylum. The asylum held its breath as I moved, and I could almost feel the weight of unseen eyes upon me, watching, waiting. But I was determined to uncover all its secrets, no matter what lay in the darkness, waiting to be found. As I continued my cautious exploration of Willowbrook, the map's markings led me to the East Wing, which, according to the ashen faces of historical photos, once housed patients who required more intensive care. The air grew colder here, the atmosphere thick with a palpable sense of forgotten stories. The walls themselves seemed to hold in the stale air of decades past, and I found myself pushing against an invisible resistance, as if the very building didn't want its secrets unearthed. The hallway in this section was lined with heavy doors, each sealed with a large metal latch, a remnant of days when security was a necessity rather than a precaution. I moved from one door to the next, trying each in turn, but found most of them immovable, locked in time. However, my persistence paid off when I came upon a door slightly ajar. The room beyond it was starkly different from the others I'd seen. It was an old therapy room, as evidenced by the faded outlines on the wall where certificates and diplomas once proudly hung. The room was unusually intact, with a heavy wooden desk and a couple of chairs that faced each other, suggesting countless conversations between doctor and patient. The layers of dust undisturbed, but for the marks of small, scurrying creatures. On the desk lay a stack of patient files, their covers thick with dust. With a reverence for the forgotten lives they represented, I leafed through them, discovering notes that spoke of treatments and therapies long discredited and abandoned. It was a chilling reminder of the asylum's grim history, yet there was no sign of recent human presence. Deciding to delve deeper into this wing, I ventured towards a staircase leading down to what old blueprints would call Sub-Level 1. Here the air grew denser, almost suffocating, as if the very essence of the place was concentrated below. The stairs creaked under my weight, echoing off the cold concrete walls. At the base, I was met with a long corridor that branched off in multiple directions. Choosing the path directly ahead, I came across a series of rooms that seemed untouched by time. Each room was sealed, a thick layer of dust acting as a barrier to the past. But it was the faint sound of dripping water from one room in particular that drew me closer. Pushing the door open, I found the source. A leak in the ceiling created a small, steady stream of water, forming a puddle on the floor. The mundane nature of the scene was oddly comforting amidst the oppressive eeriness. However, it was what lay beside the puddle that caught my attention. A recent footprint, wet and clear against the dust. Someone had been here recently. I followed the trail which led me further into the labyrinthine basement. As I moved, the air shifted around me, now carrying a faint, almost imperceptible whisper. It was a voice, or rather voices, murmuring too low to discern words but emotionally palpable enough to feel their urgency. Finally, the footprints led to a large metal door, heavily bolted and padlocked. Heart racing with anticipation, I noted this as the likely place where he was hiding. As I prepared to call out, to finally confront the man I had come so far to find, the murmuring voices halted abruptly, replaced by a silence so profound it roared in my ears. In this moment, standing before the sealed door, the reality of my situation settled upon me. This wasn't just a simple rescue mission, it was a descent into the past, unearthing the silent echoes of those who once roamed these halls. Whatever lay beyond this door, I knew it held the key to solving the mystery of the missing man, and perhaps much more. With my heart lodged firmly in my throat, I took a moment to collect my thoughts before addressing the massive sealed door. The silence was so thick, it seemed almost tangible, wrapping around me like a blanket. I knew that what lay behind this barrier might provide the answers I was desperately seeking. I took a deep breath and knocked on the door, the sound echoing back at me, muffled by the heavy metal. "Hello?" I called out cautiously. "Is anyone there?" There was a pause long enough to let doubt creep in, then a faint shuffling from the other side, like footsteps dragging across a rough surface. "Who's there?" The voice that answered was hoarse, laced with suspicion and fear. "My name's Alex," I replied, keeping my tone steady and calm. "I was hired to find you and make sure you're okay. Your brother sent me." There was another pause, this one filled with palpable tension. Then, a series of metallic clinks as bolts were drawn back and the padlock was removed. Slowly, the door creaked open, revealing a sliver of the face of the man I had come to find. His eyes were wide, darting nervously as if expecting some trick or trap. The room behind him was stark, illuminated only by the light from my flashlight. It looked like a storage area converted into a makeshift living space. There were blankets piled in one corner, various containers of water, and non-perishable food items stacked neatly against the wall. "Why didn't you come out?" I asked gently, stepping into the room but keeping a respectful distance. He hesitated, then sighed, a sound of resignation. "I thought I was being hunted," he murmured. "There's something here, in the hospital. It watches, waits. It's not human, not anymore." I nodded, understanding the terror that must have gripped him. "You mean the entity your brother mentioned?" "Yes," he said, his voice a whisper now. It started as whispers, shadows flitting just out of sight. Then it became more assertive. I thought about the journal entries, the paranoia, the abrupt end. "You've been hiding from it?" He nodded. "I found that it can't enter this room. There's something about this place it can't or won't cross. I've been safe here, but I can't leave. Not alone." That explained the padlocks and bolts, a sanctuary within a nightmare. I considered this a moment, then spoke. "Let's get you out of here. We'll do it together." His eyes flickered with a spark of hope, but also fear. "Can we really get past it?" "We have to try," I asserted, more confidently than I felt. "Do you have anything that belongs to it? Anything it might want?" He frowned, thinking, then nodded slowly. "There's a room, 2 floors up. It used to be a special care unit. I found things there. Personal things. Maybe if we take something it values, it will give us a chance to escape." "Then that's what we'll do," I said, setting the plan in motion. We spent the next few minutes preparing, gathering his sparse belongings and mentally readying ourselves for the journey upward. The air felt heavier as we left the sanctuary of the room, stepping back into the dim corridors of the asylum. Our footsteps were quiet, our breaths shallow, as we made our way to the special care unit, each of us aware of the delicate balance between hunter and hunted in this dark, twisted game of hide and seek within the haunted halls of Willowbrook. With the makeshift plan etched in our minds, we ascended the creaky, reluctant stairs leading to the special care unit. Each step felt laborious, as if the building itself was aware of our intentions and resisted our progress. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist around us, playing on our fears, but we pressed on, driven by a shared determination to escape the oppressive grip of Willowbrook. Upon reaching the special care unit, the air seemed to thicken, charged with an electric tension that made the hairs on my arms stand. The door was slightly ajar, as if inviting us, or warning us, to enter. With a deep breath, we pushed the door open, revealing a room that time had seemingly forgotten. Unlike the chaotic disarray found in other parts of the asylum, everything here was meticulously placed, preserved almost perfectly under a thick layer of dust. The room was filled with personal effects, photographs, worn books, and small trinkets that might have once brought comfort to their owners. "These must be the things," he whispered, his voice barely audible. I nodded, scanning the room with my flashlight. My beam settled on a small, leather-bound diary on a bedside table. "This looks promising," I said, reaching out to grasp it. The moment my fingers brushed the diary, a cold draft swept through the room, as if a dormant breath had been exhaled. He watched anxiously as I tucked the diary into my backpack. "Is that enough?" he asked, his voice tinged with both hope and fear. "It'll have to be," I replied, my own voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "Let's go," and quietly. We retraced our steps, moving as silently as possible, the diary feeling like a talisman in my bag. The lower we descended, the more palpable the sensation of being watched became. It was as though the walls themselves had eyes, tracking our every move, whispering secrets we weren't meant to hear. As we approached the exit, the atmosphere shifted suddenly. The oppressive, watchful feeling eased, replaced by a cautious calm. It was as though the entity, whatever it was, had receded, pulling back its dark veil to grant us passage. With the building behind us, the night air felt surprisingly warm, a stark contrast to the chill of the asylum's interior. We didn't stop, didn't speak, until we had put considerable distance between ourselves and Willowbrook. Only when the silhouette of the asylum was little more than a blot against the starry sky did we allow ourselves to pause, to breathe. He looked at me, a mix of gratitude and disbelief on his face. "I didn't think we'd make it," he admitted. "I wasn't sure either," I confessed. feeling the adrenaline begin to ebb, leaving a tired but triumphant fatigue in its wake. As we parted ways, him to reunite with his brother and me back to my own less haunted reality, I glanced back once at the looming structure of Willowbrook. The night had reclaimed it, shadows filling its broken windows, yet it seemed less menacing now, its secrets laid bare and its hold on the missing man broken. The diary, I later discovered, contained nothing supernatural, just the everyday thoughts of a former patient yearning for normalcy. Yet it had been enough, a symbolic gesture that perhaps acknowledged the presence's own trapped existence. In the end, the job was more than a search and rescue. It was a journey into the heart of human fear and resilience. Willowbrook Asylum would continue to stand, a monument to past sufferings. But for one night, it had served as a crucible, burning away the shadows that clung too closely to the soul. I stumbled upon the notion quite by accident one rainy Saturday evening, when my penchant for obscure internet rabbit holes served up something far stranger than the usual fare. It was a thread buried under a mountain of conspiracy theories on a lesser-known dark web forum, titled simply, "Time Travelers Among Us." The claim was outlandish. Certain individuals, unbeknownst to themselves, were time travelers. Their memories were supposedly wiped clean to ease their integration into our timeline, but certain triggers could reignite snippets of their future selves. At first, I laughed it off. Time travel was the stuff of science fiction, not reality. Yet, as the evening waned and the glow of my computer screen became the only light in my room, a mixture of curiosity and the relentless drumming of rain against my window coaxed me further into the depths of this bizarre claim. The thread was a mishmash of personal anecdotes and pseudoscientific explanations. One post in particular caught my attention. It was written by someone who called themselves Chrono Tracer, and it detailed a series of déjà vu experiences which they believed were actual memories of the future. According to them, specific locations, objects, or even people could trigger these memories. They described walking into a cafe they had never visited, only to be overwhelmed by the certainty that they not only knew this place but had experienced meaningful events there, events that were yet to occur. This post made me pause. Hadn't I experienced similar feelings? A street corner that seemed too familiar despite my never having been there, or a conversation with a stranger that felt rehearsed, as if we were merely replaying a script written long ago. The rational part of me wanted to dismiss it all as a quirk of human psychology. Our brains are pattern-seeking missiles after all. But then, why did these moments feel so profoundly unsettling? Compelled to dig deeper, I noticed other users shared their own stories. No threats, no sinister figures in the shadows, just ordinary people grappling with the extraordinary idea that their lives might span beyond the linear confines of time. The more I read, the more I started paying attention to my own life, watching for these triggers, these glitches in the mundane fabric of my existence. One afternoon, I visited the local library to find a book recommended in the forum, a science fiction novel dealing with time loops. As I wandered between the shelves, a title caught my eye. Not the one I was looking for, but another that resonated with an unexpected familiarity. I pulled it from the shelf, and as I flipped through its pages, a photograph slipped out and fluttered to the floor. It was an old Polaroid, edges frayed, its colors muted by time. The picture showed a couple smiling at the camera, standing in front of what looked like an old European cathedral. Something about the woman's smile tugged at me, an echo of joy mixed with a poignant ache of recognition. I didn't know her, but my heart insisted otherwise. I glanced around the quiet library, half expecting to see someone watching, perhaps ready to claim the forgotten photo. But there was no one, just rows of books and the soft rhythmic tapping of rain against the window. I placed the photo inside the front cover of the book and returned it to the shelf. As I left the library, my mind swirled with questions. Was this what Chrono Tracer meant? Could a simple photograph be a trigger? And if so, what forgotten future was it trying to stir within me? That night, I logged back into the forum, my fingers hesitant above the keyboard. I wanted to share what had happened, to find out if others had experienced similar moments. But as I started to type, I hesitated. Sharing this could pull me deeper into a world I wasn't sure I was ready for. Yet the intrigue was undeniable, almost addictive. Was I, like so many on that thread, a traveler on a temporal journey I could not remember? The questions were many, the answers elusive. As I finally drifted off to sleep, the notion of time travelers hidden in plain sight seemed not just possible, but almost comforting. In our scripted lives, perhaps some of us were meant to find our way back to futures already written, or to past we were destined to change. The weeks following my encounter with the mysterious photograph were marked by an intensified awareness of the oddities in my daily life. Each peculiar instance, instead of being dismissed as mere coincidence, now felt like a piece of a larger puzzle, insistently nudging me toward a truth hidden just out of reach. It was during a casual dinner with friends in the cozy, somewhat cramped confines of a new Italian restaurant downtown that the next significant piece fell unexpectedly into place. As we settled into our seats, the ambiance of the restaurant, its rustic decor punctuated by modern touches, struck a chord within me. It wasn't the aesthetic appeal so much as the feeling that I had been here before, surrounded by the same laughter and clinking of glasses, in an evening both entirely current and impossibly repetitive. As the night unfolded, my attention was caught by a painting on the wall across from our table. It depicted a bustling street scene, vibrant and full of energy, but with an underlying melancholy that made it compelling. I found myself drawn to a figure in the background, a woman with a red scarf, her expression contemplative, as if she were lost in a thought profound and distant. The scene was Parisian, timeless, and inexplicably familiar. "Have you decided, or are you still daydreaming about that painting?" joked one of my friends, snapping me back to the present. With a slight start, I returned my focus to the menu, but the seed of curiosity was already planted. After dinner, while my friends continued their conversations, I approached the painting for a closer look. There was an artist's signature at the corner, and a small plaque that read, Rue de l'Univers, Paris, 2024. Paris, 2024. The future. A future I felt connected to through a painting in a newly opened restaurant in my own city. The absurdity of it should have overwhelmed me, yet what I felt was an exhilarating sense of possibility. Could this be a trigger? Was this scene a memory of a place I was yet to visit, a moment I was yet to live? Driving home that night, I found my thoughts circling around the concept of temporal displacement as suggested by the dark web forum. The idea that we might be unknowingly scattered through time, living out moments non-linearly, was both unsettling and intriguing. My skepticism battled with the inexplicable emotional connections I had experienced, leaving me in a state of thoughtful anticipation. Once home, I turned to my computer, eager to document my experiences on the forum. As I composed my post, I realized I was not seeking validation so much as camaraderie in this shared journey of strange occurrences and unexplained memories. The forum had become a sanctuary for those of us touched by the inexplicable, a community where the boundaries of time and reality seemed porous, negotiable even. I wrote about the painting in the restaurant, about the photograph in the library, and about the feeling of living moments destined or already lived. As I hit submit, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. Sharing, it seemed, was not just about finding answers, but also about connecting threads in a tapestry too vast and intricate for any one of us to comprehend alone. That night, I lay in bed pondering the notion of time as something other than a linear progression. What if our lives were more like the pages of a book to be read out of order, where the past could be just a page away from the future? The thought was dizzying, and yet, as I drifted off to sleep, it was not discomfort, but a profound sense of wonder that cradled my dreams. The journey, it seemed, was just beginning. Days turned into weeks, and my life began to feel like a dual existence. One foot in the everyday world, and the other stepping through unmarked doors in time. My online posts had garnered a small following, and exchanges with others experiencing similar phenomena provided both comfort and a wealth of shared curiosity. It was through these interactions that I learned of a seminar, rather understatedly titled Temporal Anomalies and Modern Life, scheduled to be held at a local university. The guest speaker was a professor whose name frequently surfaced in our forum, Dr. Elaine Mercier, a theoretical physicist known for her research on the boundaries of time perception. The day of the seminar, I arrived early, my notebook ready and my mind open to new theories that might explain, or at least relate to, my experiences. The lecture hall was filled with a mix of academics and lay enthusiasts, each person as eager as I was to delve into the enigmatic subject matter. Dr. Mercier began with a discussion on how time might not be as linear as we perceive it to be. Our understanding of time is rooted in our biology, she explained. But what if our biology is only attuned to perceive a fraction of what time actually entails? This premise struck a chord with me, echoing my recent musings. She described scenarios where people might experience echoes of events, moments that resonate with both past and future. These echoes, she proposed, could be misinterpreted as déjà vu, a glitch in our temporal perception. As the lecture progressed, Dr. Mercier introduced a concept she called temporal displacement syndrome, a hypothetical condition where individuals could unconsciously experience moments from their future or past, causing confusion and a sense of misplaced familiarity with places, people, and events. This was the connection I had been searching for. After the seminar, I approached Dr. Mercier with questions about personal experiences, carefully framing them as hypothetical to gauge her reaction. She listened intently, her eyes reflecting a mixture of academic curiosity and cautious skepticism. The human mind is an intricate organ, capable of more than we currently understand, she said thoughtfully. While the idea of temporal displacement as a widespread phenomenon is speculative, it's not outside the realm of theoretical physics. Encouraged, I asked her about triggers, specifically if objects, locations, or sensory experiences could act as catalysts for such episodes. Possibly, she conceded. If temporal displacement were real, I'd hypothesize that certain stimuli might align with the brain's neurological patterns in a way that mirrors, or even accesses, these nonlinear time experiences. As I left the seminar, my notebook brimming with new ideas and theories, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Perhaps what I needed was a more structured approach to document these triggers and their effects on me. Over the next several days, I created a detailed journal. Each entry noted the date, time, location, and the nature of the experience. I also included emotional reactions and any subsequent anomalies in my daily routine. This methodical documentation seemed to solidify my experiences, making them feel less like fleeting fantasies and more like important pieces of a complex puzzle I was slowly assembling. The more I recorded, the more patterns I began to notice. Certain places and times were more likely to provoke these feelings of displacement. I decided to revisit some of these locations to see if repeated exposure could intensify or clarify the experiences. Each visit was a step deeper into the unknown, each step a mixture of apprehension and exhilaration. As I continued this personal exploration, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the verge of a profound discovery, something that could change not only my understanding of my own life, but perhaps offer insights into the very fabric of time itself. With my journal steadily filling up, I began to discern patterns in the tapestry of my experiences. It wasn't just random places that triggered these feelings of déjà vu and displacement, but rather specific types of locations that seemed to resonate with whatever part of me was attuned to these temporal echoes. One recurring trigger was libraries. There was something about the quiet aisles of books, the musty scent of paper mixed with the wood polish of ancient shelves, that seemed to pull at the edges of my consciousness. Each visit left me with the sensation of having slipped briefly through the cracks of time. I wondered if it was the stories within those books, layers of narrative stacked upon narrative, that somehow mirrored my own fragmented experiences of time. Another pattern emerged with bridges, structures physically meant to connect 2 points in space, and metaphorically, perhaps in my case, 2 points in time. Walking across the old footbridge in the city park always brought a rush of unexplained nostalgia, as if I were crossing back into moments I had lived but couldn't fully remember. The third and most surprising pattern involved mirrors, particularly antiques. There was a small shop near my apartment that sold vintage furniture, and each visit there was like stepping into a hall of temporal mirrors. Each reflection seemed to show more than just my own image. It hinted at other selves, other times. Could mirrors, which reflect our current image so precisely, also reflect glimpses of our past or future selves? These patterns form the basis of a new hypothesis, that physical objects and spaces that endure through time, books, bridges, mirrors, acted as conduits or amplifiers for experiencing these temporal displacements. Eager to discuss these findings with someone who might understand, I arranged a meeting with Dr. Mercier. We met at a quiet cafe, one that hadn't yet featured in my odd experiences, which somehow made it neutral ground. Dr. Mercier listened intently as I outlined my observations, occasionally nodding or interjecting with a question. "It's fascinating," she said after I'd finished, her tone both skeptical and intrigued. "You're describing what sounds like a form of environmental sensitivity, but framed in the context of time rather than just space." She suggested an experiment, to deliberately visit these trigger locations while accompanied by a witness who could document the experiences objectively. Dr. Mercier offered to be that witness, intrigued enough by my case to involve herself directly in this unusual research. Over the next several weeks, we conducted a series of field visits. Dr. Mercier observed and took notes while I engaged with the environments. Surprisingly, having an observer changed the dynamics of my experiences. I was more aware, more questioning of what I felt and why. This self-awareness did not diminish the sensations, but added a layer of analysis that was previously missing. We spent one particularly memorable afternoon at the city library, where I had first experienced the strong pull of recognition. As I walked through the aisles, Dr. Mercier trailing a discreet distance behind, I felt the familiar tug. I stopped in front of a section of old travel books, and as I pulled one from the shelf, a wave of emotion hit me. I knew this book, knew its weight in my hands, though I had never seen it before. Dr. Mercier was quick to document my reactions, asking precise questions about what I felt and saw. Her presence, rather than detracting from the experience, seemed to amplify it, grounding it in a way that felt both comforting and validating. As we left the library, Dr. Mercier shared her initial thoughts. "There's a pattern, certainly, and a strong emotional component to your experiences," she observed. "Whether it's psychological or something more, something that touches on the temporal, is still to be seen." Encouraged by her interest and the solidity that her scientific perspective brought to my experiences, I felt a renewed vigor to delve deeper into this mystery. The patterns were there, etched not only in my personal history but perhaps in the very fabric of reality. The next steps, I knew, would be crucial in either proving or disproving the incredible possibility that we might indeed be navigating more than just the physical paths through our lives. In the weeks that followed my collaboration with Dr. Mercier deepened. Our experiments became more structured, blending her rigorous scientific approach with my personal insights and experiences. This synergy between subjective experience and objective analysis created a framework that allowed us to explore the phenomenon with greater depth and breadth. Our focus narrowed to specific triggers, those locations and objects that had consistently evoked the strongest responses. The old footbridge in the park, where crossing seemed to transport me to other times. The vintage shop with its array of mirrors, each one a portal to another self. And of course, the libraries with their promise of stories that spanned the ages. One crisp autumn morning, we arranged to meet at the footbridge. The air was sharp with the scent of falling leaves, a perfect backdrop for what would become one of the most profound experiences of our investigation. As I stepped onto the bridge, Dr. Mercier beside me with her notebook at the ready, I felt an immediate and overwhelming connection. It wasn't just a sense of having been here before. It was a vivid, all-encompassing knowledge of moments lived, lost, and yet to come. Halfway across, I stopped, gripped by a vision so clear it was as though time itself had unfolded before me. I saw the bridge, not just as it was, but as it had been and would be. Children chasing each other across its span, a couple sharing their first kiss under the shelter of its arch, an old man scattering his wife's ashes into the flowing river below. These weren't just potential futures or pasts. They felt like memories, each one etched with emotions as real as any I had ever felt. Dr. Mercier watched, her usual calm demeanor giving way to an expression of awe. Later, she would describe the moment as a breakthrough, not just in our understanding of my experiences, but in her own beliefs about the nature of time. We're taught to think of time as linear, a constant forward march, she explained as we sat discussing the day's events over coffee. But what if it's more like a sea, with currents, whirlpools, even tides? What you're experiencing might be akin to dipping your hand into those waters, touching not just the surface but the depths. Inspired by this idea, we decided to document our findings in a joint paper. Dr. Mercier handled the scientific aspects, while I contributed my personal accounts. The process of writing it was cathartic, a means of weaving my scattered experiences into a coherent narrative that might help others understand and perhaps even identify their own encounters with these temporal anomalies. The paper, once published, attracted attention from various corners: academics, enthusiasts, even skeptics. The discussions it sparked were lively, often contentious, but always fascinating. They propelled the conversation into realms we hadn't anticipated, engaging a broader audience in a dialogue about the nature of time and our place within it. As I reflect on the journey that started with a simple post on a dark web forum, I am struck by the complexity of the paths we navigate, not just in the physical world, but in the realms of time, memory, and existence. What began as a personal quest for understanding has unfolded into a shared exploration of life's most profound mystery. Today, I continue to experience those moments of temporal displacement, but they no longer unsettle me. Instead, they serve as reminders that life is not merely a series of events to be endured or milestones to be achieved. It is a richer, more woven tapestry of experiences that transcend the boundaries of time. A tapestry in which we are all threads, connected in ways we may never fully understand, but which we are endlessly capable of exploring. It all started as a curious investigation. I stumbled upon a peculiar post on a dark web forum during one of my late-night escapades, fueled by a blend of insomnia and an insatiable appetite for the unusual. The post, vague yet vivid, described an abandoned amusement park that only materialized at the stroke of midnight, vanishing with the first light of dawn. It was the sort of thing you'd dismiss as an urban legend or a digital age ghost story. However, the coordinates were specific, the details intriguing, and my boredom profound. That's why, on a clear, crisp Friday night, I decided to drive out to the location mentioned in the post. It was situated outside the city, past the suburbs, where the streetlights grow sparse and the night sky stretches vast and starry above. The road was quiet, almost unnervingly so, but perfectly ordinary. When I arrived at the specified coordinates, I found myself staring at an overgrown field bordered by dense woods. There was nothing there, just the wind whispering through the trees and the distant hoot of an owl. I checked my phone. 11:57 p.m. I decided to wait. my skepticism nearly convincing me to start the engine and head back home. But then, as my phone's clock reluctantly clicked to 12 a.m., something extraordinary happened. The air shimmered like the surface of a bubble, and from the nothingness, structures began to materialize. Faded signs, rusty gates, and dilapidated rides slowly emerged from the darkness, as if painted into existence by an invisible hand. The gate read, Mirage Park. Stepping out of my car, I approached the gate. It was eerily silent. No creaks, no groans of old metal, just silence, as if the park were holding its breath. Pushing open the gate, which moved noiselessly on its hinges, I felt a surreal calmness envelop me. The park was deserted, rides like ghostly relics from a bygone era standing silent under the moonlight. There was the Ferris wheel with its gondolas swaying gently, the carousel with its painted horses frozen mid-prance, and the roller coaster with tracks disappearing into the shadows. Compelled by a mix of awe and unease, I walked toward the central square of the park. That's when I noticed the map, aged and faded, but remarkably intact. It listed various attractions: the Hall of Mirrors, the Tunnel of Whispers, the Labyrinth of Shadows, and more. Each name was more inviting and foreboding than the last. As I was studying the map, a soft tune began to play, a melodic tinkling that seemed to come from the carousel. It was operational, lights flickering on in a haphazard, almost playful sequence. The horses began to move, slowly at first, then with increasing vigor, as the music swelled to a cheerful crescendo. Curiosity overpowered my hesitation. I approached the carousel, the music inviting yet strangely out of place in the deserted midnight park. As I stepped onto the platform, the music suddenly stopped, and the light snapped off, plunging me into darkness. My heart skipped a beat, but before I could retreat, the lights flickered back on, and the ride resumed its eerie, uninterrupted waltz. I realized then that the post on the dark web hadn't been an invitation, it was a warning. The exit I had walked through was no longer where I had left it. In its place was just another part of the unending park landscape. The gate had vanished, and with it, any obvious path home. I decided then to explore the park, looking for another way out. Each step took me deeper into the heart of Mirage Park, where the attractions whispered secrets of a forgotten joy and an encapsulating dread. Little did I know the only way out was to go further in, to face the rides that seemed almost alive, watching and waiting for a visitor to dare their paths. With the park's layout imprinted in my mind and the carousel's eerie tune fading behind me, I ventured toward the Hall of Mirrors. The name promised a simple diversion, but in Mirage Park, nothing was as it seemed. The building stood 2 stories tall, its exterior festooned with ornate, twisting metal that gleamed under the moonlight like silver veins on the surface of a leaf. As I pushed open the heavy wooden door, a different sound greeted me. Whispers. They were soft and indistinct, like conversations floating in from a distant party. Inside, the hall was lined with mirrors of all shapes and sizes. Some were tall and regal, others round and convivial, but all shared one trait. The reflections were subtly wrong. I walked deeper into the hall, my reflection trailing beside me in the mirrors, slightly delayed, slightly altered. In some mirrors I was taller. In others, my clothes appeared out of fashion for the era they reflected. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of hushed tones that seemed to be discussing me, pondering my presence in their domain. I stopped in front of a particularly large mirror. My reflection did the same, but its eyes darted away momentarily as if catching sight of something over its shoulder. I spun around, heart racing not with fear but with an adrenaline-fueled curiosity. There was nothing but the empty path I had walked down. Turning back to the mirror, I saw that my reflection had its hand extended, as if inviting me to dance. Compelled by a mix of disbelief and intrigue, I reached out towards the glass. My fingers expected the cool, hard surface of a mirror, but found only air. The glass rippled like water, and my hand slipped through. The whispers crescendoed into clear voices calling me by name, guiding me deeper. With a steadying breath, I stepped through the mirror. The world on the other side was the same hall, but the atmosphere was thick with a fog of soft silver light. The mirrors here didn't just reflect, they shimmered with scenes of past joys and sorrows of visitors long gone, playing out silent vignettes. As I walked, each mirror revealed a story. A young couple sharing a clandestine moment, an old man smiling as he watched children play, a woman quietly crying into her handkerchief. These mirrors didn't just reflect images, they seemed to reflect souls. At the end of the hall, a grand mirror stood, framed in gold and as tall as the ceiling. This mirror did not share the gentle, nostalgic spirit of the others. Its reflection was stark and direct, showing not just my image but an echo of my inner self. Standing before it, I felt exposed, as if the mirror could see into the deepest parts of me, revealing fears I had long buried. Yet there was no menace here, only an invitation to face what I carried inside. As I confronted my own gaze, the background of the mirror slowly shifted, revealing a new path, a doorway that led back into the park. The whispers faded, replaced by a newfound silence that seemed to approve of my journey through the hall. Stepping back into the park, the night felt a little colder, a little lonelier, but I was drawn forward by the need to find an exit, to see what other secrets Mirage Park held. The next attraction awaited, its lights flickering in the distance, calling to me under the watchful gaze of the moon. Emerging from the Hall of Mirrors, I found myself drawn toward the next peculiar attraction outlined on the worn park map, the Tunnel of Whispers. Its entrance was marked by an archway entwined with ivy, and dim, flickering lights receded into the curved passage beyond. Unlike the vibrant, albeit eerie presence of the Hall of Mirrors, the tunnel promised a quieter sort of mystery. As I approached, the sounds of the park, the distant murmur of the leaves and the occasional creak from an old ride, faded away. The air grew cool as I entered, and the subdued lighting cast long shadows that danced along the walls. The tunnel was lined with velvet curtains that brushed against my arms as I walked, their touch soft and unexpectedly comforting. I hadn't gone far when the whispers began. They were gentle at first, as if cautious not to startle me. I could hear my name, whispered so softly it seemed like a trick of my mind. Then, more voices joined, a symphony of tones and timbres, each whispering not just my name, but snippets of advice, words of encouragement, and tender secrets. The whispers seemed to know not only who I was, but who I might be. And they spoke with the kindness of an old friend. The path curved gently, and with each step the whispers grew in clarity. They told stories of the people who had walked this path before me, their joys and their regrets. It was as if the tunnel held the essence of countless fleeting moments, and now it shared them with me, a gift to a solitary listener in the quiet night. Halfway through, the tunnel widened into a small chamber. Here, the curtains pulled back to reveal alcoves, each one illuminated by a single soft light. Inside each alcove was a simple object, a toy, a book, a scarf. The whispers intensified around these items, imbuing them with immense significance, as though they were relics of entire lives. I was drawn to a small, leather-bound book. As I picked it up, the whispers crescendoed, urging me to read. The pages were filled with handwritten notes, sketches of the park, and messages left by previous visitors. Each entry was a confession, a hope, or a memory, penned with the kind of honesty that people reserve for the dark. Absorbed in the stories, I felt a connection to these strangers, understanding their fears and dreams as if they were my own. It was a poignant reminder of the shared human experience, a thread of commonality that ran through every disparate life. After replacing the book, I continued through the tunnel. The whispers seemed to approve, their voices now a comforting backdrop to my journey. They guided me to the end of the tunnel, where the path led up a gentle incline and out into the moonlit park. The exit of the tunnel was like waking from a dream, the voices fading behind me, leaving a resonant silence. As I stepped back into the cool night air, the park seemed even more surreal than before. The rides loomed as large silhouettes against the starry sky, each beckoning me to discover its secrets. Ahead, the labyrinth of shadows awaited, its entrance flanked by torches that flickered like fireflies in the dark. With a deep breath, I moved toward it, ready to uncover what lay within its twisting paths. The night air felt heavy as I approached the entrance of the labyrinth of shadows. The flickering torches cast an inviting glow, beckoning me forward into the maze. It was more formidable than the other attractions, with high walls that seemed to absorb the light, muting the usual gleam of the moon and stars. Stepping into the labyrinth, the pathway twisted and turned unpredictably. The walls, made of densely woven hedges, were too high to see over, and their branches intertwined so tightly that not even a whisper of wind could pass through. The silence was profound, a stark contrast to the communicative tunnel of whispers. Here, the quiet was so pervasive that even my own footsteps seemed to be swallowed by the shadows. As I navigated the turns and dead ends, the labyrinth challenged more than just my sense of direction. Each section I entered held a subtle puzzle, a question posed by the park itself. Simple plaques were mounted on the hedge walls, each bearing a riddle or a poetic line that required a moment of contemplation or a touch of insight to solve. The answers, when spoken aloud, seemed to unlock the next section of the path, as if the labyrinth itself were listening and responding. These riddles drew on the lore of the park, hinting at its mysterious origins and the enigmatic figure who had designed it. According to one plaque, the park was once a vibrant haven filled with laughter and light before it slipped into legend and became the phantom place it was now. The creator, it seemed, had fashioned this maze not just as a diversion, but as a reflection of life's own intricate journeys. Navigating the labyrinth became a meditation on life's complexities and the choices we make. With each correct answer, the path ahead seemed to grow a little brighter, the shadows a bit less intimidating. Along the way, statues appeared amidst the hedges, depicting various mythical figures, each symbolizing virtues like bravery, wisdom, and joy. They served as silent guardians, their presence reassuring in the enveloping darkness. After what felt like hours, the final challenge presented itself at the heart of the labyrinth. A large, circular clearing opened up, with a solitary statue of the park's creator at the center. The final plaque read, "True escape is not from the path, but from the shadows within." Understanding dawned on me. This was not just a physical journey, but an emotional and intellectual one. I spoke my deepest fear aloud, addressing the statue as if it could hear me. In doing so, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a shadow slipping away into the night. As I acknowledged this, the pathway back to the park's main area lit up, illuminated by gentle lights that hadn't been visible before. The walls of the labyrinth seemed to recede, and the route back was clear and unobstructed. Stepping out of the maze, I felt a sense of accomplishment and clarity. The labyrinth had offered me a journey through the shadows, not just around them. Refreshed and with a newfound sense of understanding, I looked up to see the final attraction of Mirage Park waiting for me. The roller coaster of echoes stood in the distance, its tracks gleaming under the moonlight, promising one last ride and perhaps the key to finally finding my way out of this enigmatic midnight park. With newfound courage from my journey through the labyrinth, I walked toward the roller coaster of echoes. The structure towered above the park, its tracks twisting into the sky like ribbons in the wind, silhouetted against the moonlit night. Its name hinted at more than just a physical ride. It promised a journey through memories and time, resonating with the echoes of past laughter and screams of thrill. As I approached, the entrance gate creaked open automatically, inviting me in without a touch. The coaster cars lined up neatly at the platform, their paint faded but still hinting at the bright colors they once boasted. I chose a front seat, securing myself as the harness locked with a gentle click. There was no operator, no announcements, just the sound of the wind and a faint melodic hum that seemed to emanate from the tracks themselves. The ride began slowly, the coaster car climbing the first great hill with a steady, rhythmic clanking that seemed to sync with my heartbeat. Reaching the peak, I braced myself, not just for the descent, but for whatever revelation this ride might bring. With a breath-stealing swoop, the coaster plunged down the first drop and the world blurred into streaks of shadow and starlight. As the wind whipped my face, each twist and turn brought a different memory to life. Scenes from my own past flickered before me like frames of a movie. Days of joy, nights of worry, moments of triumph. The coaster's name became clear. It echoed with the personal histories of all who dared ride it. Each loop and spiral seemed to peel away layers of doubt and fear, the speed of the ride purging them like chaff from wheat. It wasn't just a ride. It was catharsis on rails, a physical manifestation of emotional highs and lows. As the ride continued, each memory became less distinct, blending into a tapestry of experience that was both uniquely mine and universally shared. Finally, the coaster car ascended one last hill, slower than before, allowing a moment of quiet reflection under the stars. At the top, the world seemed to pause, the only sounds the distant waves of trees and the soft hum of the track beneath. Then, with a gentle roll forward, the coaster descended into the final stretch, a smooth, straight path back to the platform. As the ride came to a stop, the harness lifted, and I stepped out onto the platform, feeling strangely light, as if I had left some invisible burden on the tracks. The park around me was quiet, the ride stilled and the attractions dimmed, as if acknowledging that my journey was complete. Walking out of the roller coaster of echoes, I noticed the sky beginning to lighten in the east, the first hints of dawn stretching across the horizon. The park, true to the legend, began to fade as morning approached. The structures dissolved into the mist that had brought them forth, leaving behind the empty field bordered by woods. As I walked back to my car, the sun crested the horizon, and the normal sounds of morning returned. Birds chirped, and a distant car engine hummed. I drove away with a sense of peace, the memory of Mirage Park etched not as a place on a map, but as a vivid journey through the echoes of life. And though the park was gone with the daylight, I knew it was out there, waiting to be rediscovered and to offer its mysterious rides to another weary traveler under the cover of midnight.